The gold coins slipped through Felicity Zimmerman's trembling fingers as she counted them again, the paltry sum mocking her desperate situation. $10.35, all that remained of her life savings. Dust swirled through the cramped room of the boarding house, where she'd spent the last 3 nights. The April winds of 1875 finding every crack in the weathered walls of Silver Creek, Colorado. She twisted the silver band on her finger, her mother's wedding ring the last family heirloom she possessed. The journey west had stripped her of everything else. First her parents to cholera back in Philadelphia, then her meager inheritance to the unscrupulous banker who'd swindled her, promising safe passage and opportunity in the West. Now here she sat, 22 years old, alone, with barely enough money for another week's lodging. Felicity tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear and squared her shoulders. She'd have to sell the ring. The thought sent a stab of pain through her chest, but sentiment wouldn't fill her stomach or provide shelter. She gathered her shawl around her shoulders and stepped into the dusty main street of Silver Creek. The town bustled with midday activity, miners heading to the saloon, ladies chatting outside the general store, a stagecoach rumbling down the center of town. Felicity kept her head down, heading straight for Hargrove's Pawn and Sundries. The bell jangled as she pushed open the door. "Good day, miss," Mr. Hargrove said, his spectacles perched on his bulbous nose. "What can I help you with today?" Felicity steeled herself, sliding the ring from her finger. "I need to sell this," she said, placing it on the counter. Hargrove picked it up, examining it in the light from the window. "Silver, decent craftsmanship, nothing fancy." He reached for his scale. "I can give you $8. "8?" Felicity gasped. "Sir, it's worth at least 20. It was my mother's wedding band." Hargrove's expression remained impassive. "Sentiment doesn't add value, miss. $8 is fair." A deep voice spoke from behind her. "Seems a mite low to me, Hargrove. I reckon that ring's worth 15 at least." Felicity turned to find herself looking up at a tall man in a worn leather vest and dusty cowboy hat. His face was tanned from the sun, a hint of stubble on his strong jaw. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, clear blue, like the sky after a summer storm. "Daniels, this is my business," Hargrove grumbled. "No one asked your opinion." The cowboy Daniels stepped closer, his spurs jingling softly. "Just making an observation." He tipped his hat to Felicity. "Pardon the intrusion, madam." "No intrusion at all," Felicity said, lifting her chin. "And you're right, Mr. Daniels. This ring is worth far more than $8. Hargrove scowled. "Fine, $10, and that's my final offer." Felicity bit her lip. $10 would keep her fed and housed for another 2 weeks. Time enough, perhaps, to find some kind of employment. With a heavy heart, she nodded. "Deal," she whispered. Hargrove counted out the money, and Felicity felt a piece of her heart go with the ring as it disappeared into his hand. She tucked the bills into her reticule and turned to leave, nearly colliding with the cowboy who still stood nearby. "Excuse me," she murmured. "Miss," he said, tipping his hat again. "Drew Yates at your service." "Felicity Zimmerman," she replied automatically, then immediately regretted offering her name to a stranger. "Miss Zimmerman, I was just heading to Maggie's Cafe for some lunch. Would you care to join me? Their beef stew is the best this side of the Mississippi." Felicity hesitated. Proper ladies didn't dine with men they just met. But something in his expression, open, honest, without a hint of impropriety, made her pause. "I couldn't impose," she said. Drew Yates smiled, and it transformed his face. "No imposition at all. In fact, it would be a kindness. Gets mighty lonely eating by myself day after day." Before she could respond, a commotion erupted outside. Shouts and the pounding of hooves filled the air. Drew's expression changed instantly. his hand moving to the pistol at his hip. "Stay here," he ordered, all warmth gone from his voice as he stepped to the door. Felicity followed despite his instruction, peering around his broad shoulders. 4 men on horseback thundered down the main street, firing pistols into the air. People scattered, diving for cover. "The Blackwell gang," Hargrove whispered fearfully from behind the counter. "They've been hitting towns all across the territory." Drew's jaw tightened. "Miss Zimmerman, stay inside. Don't come out until it's safe." He stepped onto the boardwalk, standing tall as the outlaws reined in their horses near the bank across the street. Felicity watched in horror as Drew walked calmly into the middle of the dusty road, his hand hovering near his gun. "You boys might want to reconsider whatever you're planning," he called out, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent street. The leader of the gang, a bearded man with a patchwork coat, laughed. "1 man against 4. Those are poor odds, friend." "For you, maybe," Drew replied evenly. "I'm the sheriff of Silver Creek. This town is under my protection." Felicity gasped. The handsome cowboy was the town sheriff. He didn't wear a badge that she could see. The outlaws exchanged glances, clearly reassessing the situation. The leader spat into the dirt. "Another day, then," he growled, wheeling his horse around. The gang galloped out of town as quickly as they had arrived, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. The townspeople emerged from their hiding places, several men approaching Drew with pats on the back and words of gratitude. Felicity stood frozen in the doorway of the pawn shop, watching as he smiled and modestly waved off their praise. When he turned back toward her, she saw something flashing in his palm. Her ring. Drew walked back to the pawn shop, ducking his head slightly to enter. "I believe this belongs to you, Miss Zimmerman," he said quietly, holding out the silver band. "How did you?" she began. "Let's just say Mr. Hargrove and I came to an understanding." He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "A lady shouldn't have to part with something so precious." Felicity stared at the ring, then at the sheriff. "I cannot accept. You don't even know me." "I know enough," Drew said. "I know you're new in town, alone and facing hard times, and I know that ring means the world to you." He held it out again. "Please." With trembling fingers, Felicity took the ring. "Thank you," she whispered, "but I cannot repay you." "No need," Drew assured her. Now, about that lunch invitation, Felicity couldn't help but smile. "I believe I would like that very much, Sheriff Yates." Maggie's Cafe was a warm, welcoming place filled with the aroma of fresh bread and hearty stew. Drew led Felicity to a corner table, pulling out her chair with a gallantry she hadn't experienced since leaving Philadelphia. "Miss Maggie," Drew called to the plump woman behind the counter. "2 of your famous stews, if you please." "Coming right up, Sheriff," Maggie replied with a knowing smile that made Felicity's cheeks warm. "You're not wearing a badge," Felicity observed once they were seated. Drew chuckled, removing his hat to reveal thick brown hair with a slight wave. "Lost it in a scuffle last week, waiting on a new one from Denver." He leaned forward. "But I'm more interested in your story, Miss Zimmerman. What brings a lady like yourself to Silver Creek?" Felicity hesitated, then found herself telling him everything: her parents' deaths, the banker's deception, her dwindling funds and fading hopes. Drew listened attentively, his blue eyes never leaving her face. "That's a mighty difficult journey for anyone, let alone a woman on her own," he said when she finished. "You've shown remarkable courage." "Not courage," Felicity replied. "Desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing." Drew smiled as Maggie placed 2 steaming bowls before them. "Now eat up. Everything looks brighter on a full stomach." The stew was indeed delicious, and Felicity realized how hungry she'd been. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Drew spoke again. "What are your plans now?" he asked. Felicity sighed. Fine work, I suppose. I can so keep accounts, though I doubt there's much call for such skills in a mining town. You'd be surprised, Drew said. As it happens, I know the school teacher, Mrs. Abernathy, is looking for an assistant. The town's growing fast with all the new silver strikes. Too many children for one teacher to handle. Hope flickered in Felicity's chest. Do you think she might consider me? I have no formal training as a teacher. But you're educated, well-spoken, and by your own admission, desperate. Drew's eyes twinkled. Those are solid qualifications in these parts. For the first time in months, Felicity laughed. The sound surprised her as if it belonged to someone else entirely. Drew's expression softened. That's a mighty pretty sound. You should do it more often. The next morning, Drew escorted Felicity to the schoolhouse on the edge of town. Mrs. Abernathy, a stern-looking woman with kind eyes, interviewed her briefly, then offered her the position on the spot. $20 a month plus room and board in the attached quarters, Mrs. Abernathy said. You'll help with the younger children primarily. Can you start tomorrow? Dazed by this sudden change in fortune, Felicity could only nod. Yes, madam, thank you. Outside, she turned to Drew with shining eyes. I don't know how to thank you. No thanks needed, he replied. Silver Creek just gained a fine teacher, and that benefits us all. Over the next few weeks, Felicity settled into her new role. The children were lively but eager to learn, and Mrs. Abernathy proved to be a patient mentor. Her small room behind the schoolhouse was clean and private, a luxury after the noisy boarding house. Drew visited often, sometimes bringing small gifts, a jar of honey from a local farmer, wildflowers from his rides out on the range, a ribbon for her hair from the general store. Each time, Felicity's heart beat a little faster at the sight of him. One evening in late May, he invited her to the town social. There'll be dancing, he said, a hint of shyness in his usually confident manner. Thought you might enjoy it. Felicity wore her best dress, a blue calico that brought out the color in her eyes. She'd carefully mended the worn spots and added some lace from Mrs. Abernathy's sewing basket. When Drew arrived to escort her, the appreciation in his gaze made her blush. You look beautiful, Miss Zimmerman, he said softly. The social was held in the town hall, decorated with paper lanterns and spring flowers. A small band played lively tunes while couples twirled across the wooden floor. Felicity knew many of the townspeople, now parents of her students, shopkeepers, ranchers from the outlying areas. Drew led her in a waltz, his hand warm at her waist. You dance well, Sheriff, she teased. My mother insisted all her sons learn, he replied. Said no Yates boy would disgrace her by clomping around like a workhorse at social functions. You have brothers, too, both ranching up in Wyoming. A shadow crossed his face. Haven't seen them in 2 years. Felicity sensed there was more to the story, but the music changed to a livelier tune, and the moment passed. They danced until her cheeks were flushed and her feet ached pleasantly. As they walked back to the schoolhouse under a canopy of stars, Drew grew quiet. When they reached her door, he cleared his throat. Miss Zimmerman, Felicity, he began, using her given name for the first time. I've grown mighty fond of you these past weeks. Felicity's heart raced. And I of you, Sheriff. Drew, he corrected gently. Just Drew to you. Drew, she repeated, liking the way it felt on her lips. He took her hand, his touch sending warmth up her arm. I'm not a man for flowery words or grand gestures, but I'd be honored if you'd allow me to court you properly. Felicity looked up at him, this man who had returned her mother's ring, who had given her hope when she had none. I would like that very much, she whispered. He lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Good night, Felicity. Good night, Drew. June brought scorching heat to Silver Creek. The schoolhouse was stifling despite the windows thrown wide open, and the children grew restless in the afternoon hours. When the term ended in mid-June, Felicity found herself with unexpected free time. Drew suggested a picnic by the creek that gave the town its name. "It's cooler by the water," he promised. They rode out on horseback. Felicity somewhat awkwardly perched side saddle on a gentle mare borrowed from the livery. Drew led them to a shady spot where silver-leafed cottonwoods overhung the burbling creek. Wildflowers dotted the grassy bank. "It's beautiful," Felicity sighed, accepting Drew's hand as she dismounted. They spread a blanket and unpacked the basket Maggie had prepared: fried chicken, biscuits, apple pie, and a jug of cool lemonade. After they ate, Drew stretched out, hat over his face against the dappled sunlight. "This is my favorite spot in the whole county," he murmured. "Found it my first week here, 3 years ago." "Where were you before?" Felicity asked, curiosity overcoming her usual reserve. Drew was silent so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he pushed his hat back and gazed up at the leaves overhead. "I rode with a gang for a while," he said quietly. "After the war. Did things I'm not proud of." Felicity stilled, shocked by his confession. "Nothing as bad as the Blackwell gang," he continued. "Never hurt innocent folks, but I was angry after Gettysburg. Lost my best friend there. Came back different." "What changed?" she asked softly. Drew sat up, plucking a blade of grass. "We were planning to rob a bank in a little town in Kansas. I went in first to scout it out. There was a woman there depositing her dead husband's life savings. She had 3 little children with her." His eyes grew distant. "Reminded me of my mother after my pa died. Something just broke loose inside me." "What did you do?" warned the bank manager. "Sent word to the marshal. My gang got caught, but I slipped away." He met her gaze directly. "I've been trying to make amends ever since. Took this job when no one else wanted it. Silver Creek was lawless before I came." Felicity reached for his hand. "Thank you for telling me." "Had to," Drew said. "If I'm courting you proper, you deserve to know the truth about me. Understand if you want nothing more to do with me." "Do you think so little of me?" Felicity asked, squeezing his hand. "That I would judge you for your past rather than the man you are now?" The relief in his eyes made her heart ache. "Most would." "I am not most people, Sheriff Yates," she said firmly. "And neither are you." July brought Independence Day celebrations and a heat wave that left the town dusty and irritable. Tempers flared in the saloons, keeping Drew busy with drunken brawls and minor disputes. Felicity saw less of him than she would have liked, but treasured their moments together even more for their rarity. One evening, as they walked along the main street after sharing supper at Maggie's, a rider came thundering into town. "Sheriff!" the man yelled, reining his lathered horse to a stop. "Blackwell gang hit the McDermott ranch, burned the place to the ground." Drew's expression hardened. "Anyone hurt?" "McDermott's got a bullet in his shoulder. They took his wife and daughter." Felicity gasped in horror. The McDermott's little girl, Sarah, was one of her students, a bright 7-year-old with gap-toothed smile. Drew was already striding toward the jail. "Get Doc Peterson out to the ranch and round up any men willing to ride with me." "Drew," Felicity called, hurrying after him. "Be careful." He turned, his face softening momentarily. "Always am." He reached into his pocket and pressed something into her hand. "Hold on to this for me. I'll be back for it." Felicity looked down to see a simple gold band resting in her palm. A man's wedding ring. "It was my father's," Drew explained quietly. "Only thing of value I own." Before she could respond, he was gone, barking orders to the gathering men. Within 20 minutes, a posse of 12 riders thundered out of town, Drew at their head. 3 days passed with no word. Felicity couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She clutched Drew's ring, offering countless prayers for his safe return. On the morning of the fourth day, a sentry posted at the edge of town rang the alert bell. Felicity ran with the other townspeople to the main street. A ragged procession approached the posse returning, several men wounded. Mrs. McDermott rode double with one of the ranchers, her face bruised but alive. Little Sarah was cradled in front of another rider, her small head resting against his chest. But Felicity saw only one person, Drew, his shirt blood-stained, a crude bandage around his left arm but upright in his saddle. Their eyes met across the distance, and the relief that flooded through her was so powerful she nearly collapsed. The town erupted in cheers as the riders reached the main street. Dr. Peterson rushed forward to tend the wounded. Felicity pushed through the crowd until she reached Drew's horse. "You're hurt," she said, reaching up to him. Drew dismounted stiffly, wincing as his boots hit the ground. "Just a graze. Got 4 of the gang, including their leader. The rest scattered." His eyes searched her face. "You've been crying." "I thought I might lose you," Felicity admitted, her voice breaking. Drew pulled her close with his good arm, uncaring of the spectators. "Never," he promised gruffly. "I had something precious to come back for." August brought afternoon thunderstorms that cooled the air but turned the streets to mud. Felicity prepared for the new school term, organizing supplies and planning lessons. Drew's wound healed cleanly, leaving only a thin scar that puckered the skin of his upper arm. They spent every free moment together, their courtship progressing with a speed that might have scandalized Philadelphia society, but seemed perfectly natural in the frontier town. Drew spoke of his ranch outside of town, small but growing, with a sturdy cabin he'd built himself. "It's not much," he admitted one evening as they sat on the schoolhouse steps watching lightning flicker in the distant mountains. "But there's room to expand. Good water, decent grazing." Felicity heard the question he wasn't quite asking. "It sounds wonderful," she said softly. Drew took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. "I'm not a wealthy man, Felicity. Can't offer you fine things or an easy life." "I've had fine things," she replied. "They didn't bring happiness." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch. "Been carrying this around for 2 weeks now, waiting for the right moment." He emptied the contents into his palm, a delicate gold ring with a small pearl. "It was my grandmother's." Felicity's breath caught as Drew slid from the step to one knee in the mud. "Felicity Zimmerman, I love you more than I thought possible. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Oh, yes." Drew slipped the ring onto her finger, then reached for her other hand where his mother's silver band still rested. "Keep wearing that one too," he said. "Some things are too precious to set aside." They were married in the town church on a crisp September morning, with the aspen leaves beginning to turn gold on the mountainsides. Mrs. Abernathy helped Felicity sew a wedding dress of cream-colored muslin with lace trim. Drew wore a new black suit that made him look more handsome than ever. The entire town turned out for the celebration. Even Drew's brothers surprised them, arriving from Wyoming with hearty congratulations and wedding gifts, a fine milk cow, and a matched pair of rocking chairs for the cabin porch. As they rode to Drew's ranch that evening, their ranch now, Felicity felt a contentment she had never known before. The cabin glowed warmly in the gathering dusk, smoke curling from the chimney. "I had Maggie come out earlier to start a fire and leave some supper," Drew explained, lifting Felicity from her horse. Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable, a main room with a stone fireplace, a sturdy table with chairs, a small kitchen area. A doorway led to a bedroom where a large bed was covered with a colorful quilt. "Welcome home, Mrs. Yates," Drew said, his voice husky. Felicity turned in his arms, gazing up at the man who had saved her in more ways than one. "Home," she repeated. "I like the sound of that." Later, as they lay wrapped in each other's arms, the moon casting silver light through the window, Drew traced the 2 rings on her left hand. "Never thought I'd find happiness like this," he murmured against her hair. "Especially not with a proper Eastern lady." Felicity smiled in the darkness. "And I never imagined falling in love with a reformed outlaw turned sheriff." "Life has a way of surprising us," Drew said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Particularly when we're at our lowest." "When I tried to sell my mother's ring," Felicity mused, "I thought I was losing my last connection to my past. Instead, I found my future." Drew's arms tightened around her. "I knew the moment I saw you in that pawn shop that you were something special. Couldn't let you lose something so precious." "So you slipped it back to me and offered me yours instead," Felicity said, touching his father's band that now encircled his finger. "Best trade I ever made," Drew said with a smile in his voice. Felicity nestled closer, listening to the steady beat of his heart. From desperate circumstances had come unexpected joy. The journey west had taken everything from her, only to give her something far more valuable in return, a love as vast and promising as the frontier itself. By the following spring, Silver Creek had grown with the success of the mines. Drew hired a deputy, allowing him more time to develop their ranch. Felicity continued teaching, now with 15 students ranging from 5 to 16 years old. Their cabin expanded too. Drew added another bedroom and enlarged the main living area. When Felicity discovered she was expecting their first child, he built a nursery with a window facing east so the baby would wake with the morning sun. Their daughter arrived on a snowy December night in 1876, with Maggie and Dr. Peterson in attendance. They named her Alina Rose after both their mothers. Drew cradled the tiny bundle with wonder in his eyes. "She's perfect," he whispered, "just like her mama." As Felicity watched her husband with their daughter, she thought of the desperate young woman who had entered a pawn shop nearly 2 years before, ready to sell her last treasure. How could she have known that losing her mother's ring would lead her to the greatest treasure of all, a love strong enough to build a life upon, as enduring as the mountains that surrounded their home, as precious as the gold bands they wore? Drew looked up, meeting her gaze with eyes full of love. "Happy?" he asked. Felicity smiled, her heart overflowing. "More than I ever dreamed possible." Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing their ranch in pristine white. But inside the cabin, warmth and love wrapped around the little family like the most perfect gift, a new beginning, forged from courage and kindness, sealed with 2 rings and countless promises kept.